content to it. And if you can't even start,
look, so like just imagine Taven is saying something like, I'm skeptical that knowledge exists, right? Now, if someone were to say that, like, do you know, how could you be skeptical of it? Well, a lot of people seem to think it's a coherent concept, and a lot of people seem to disagree with that. And I'm not sure whether or not I believe in one of those things or not. So I don't even know. But I mean, you don't have to have a conception. All you have to recognize is that someone has some sort of conception. So like, imagine a parallel with the gremlins thing, right? Like, say someone asks, do you believe that gremlins exist? And a person could say, well, I'm agnostic about the existence of gremlins. And they're like, do you know what gremlins are? And they say, how do you know that gremlins are a thing? Well, I see gremlins being hotly debated all the time. I don't know what the content of the debates are. Like, some people argue that, gremlins rip the wings off planes, and other people vehemently argue that they don't do that. So to me, it could go either way. Maybe there are these things, maybe there are not these things. I don't know.
you mean by these things is just some word that people have talked about. I mean, it just seems like, on that analysis, it just seems like straightforwardly irrational or something, or is that what you're saying, Taven?
Yeah, so I think Josh's example was good. I think a better example would be the analogy of a square circle. And I don't know why you guys don't get it, but when people say, I know what a square circle is, right? And another person X says, this is what a square circle actually is. To me, I don't even know where to begin to understand what that is. So I say, well, I'm kind of skeptical about these square circle theories. I don't know what they are. You've defined them these ways. I reject your definitions. I don't think that's a square circle. It doesn't make sense that a square circle even exists. So when I say I'm skeptical about a square circle, all I'm saying is I'm rejecting theories that are out there that say this is what
rejecting is different from skeptical, right? Like, you could doubt it, right? Doubt is different from rejection. I'm asking you if you're rejecting these theses.
What?
Is skepticism synonymous with doubt for you?
Is skepticism synonymous with doubt?
Yeah.
I would say no. I mean, a doubt would be like, you're not sure about all of these things, right?
Right. And so what is skepticism?
Skepticism is the position that you can't have knowledge, that you can't have yeah, it is.
No.
Ontologically speaking, yeah.
No. Show me the definition of skepticism that is ontological, that says you cannot. This is just a thing that you cannot have knowledge about.
Okay. So I'll redefine it then. Doesn't have to be cannot. Doesn't have to be a positivist perspective. You can say, well, like, how else do you define, like, what does global skeptic mean? Like,
no, we're asking you. You're the one using these fucking terms, bud.
Hold on, I'll go get the Stanford definition.
Yeah, I think you should.
Stanford skepticism.
I think that in Josh's example, I think what I would want to be committed to is, in that position, you're not really skeptical about gremlin, right? You might be skeptical about someone's testimony or something like that, or you might believe in the existence, right, based on the somebody's testimony. But it's not that you believe in gremlins because you don't know what gremlins are. You just believe the testimony of someone that you feel that like presupposes like some type of concept or something like that. So I don't know if I even like that analogy. It seems like way reaching too. And then there's obviously the concern about, it just seems kind of irrational to do the, like, okay, I'm skeptical on the basis of something I don't even know that's coherent or whatever, or even what it is, on the basis of trusting some people's views. I mean, like, maybe if you could maybe defend, like, oh no, that's rational, right? It's rational to accept testimony, blah 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 blah. I mean, we could get into that, but it just seems like such a fucking stretch, man. Like, I mean, I don't know how to make any sense of it, really. Like, I mean, I feel like my view is like going to be like very commonsensical, like pretty straightforward.
All right. Okay. So the definition for skepticism on Google is the theory that certain knowledge is impossible. Now you're probably going to ask me, well, how do I know that? Well, I don't have a definition for knowledge, so it doesn't matter.
I want you to know what you think is impossible. That's all.
Wait, so you think blah blah is impossible?
What? No,
So-
I'm pointing to, again, like I said, you're saying, I'm saying blah blah, but I'm not saying blah blah. I'm saying what people describe to be knowledge doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, but
Right,
what
and so-
description? The JTB description, the pragmatic description, the coherentist description? Which
I haven't
description?
come across.
That's
I haven't come across a good one. Yeah, I would reject the JTB and the
so then you're
pragmatic one.
saying what Josh said in the former, right? Which is very straightforward. All you're saying is you're skeptical about like the bulk of all the forerunning common sense conceptions that are banded around in philosophy, like JTB, coherentism, whatever other bullshit that is. And so what you're saying, what in there, you actually understand the fucking proposition or the thesis that you're skeptical about. You're skeptical about this conception, the JTB conception. Skeptical about the coherentist conception. In each one of those cases, even though it's a blanket skepticism on all the different type of conceptions, right? You still could tell me what those conceptions are. And so that's
But
that's
isn't
fine.
that what I said? Isn't that what I said? What did I say? That's precisely what I said.
It's not very clear.
You
actually.
can go back and play it. I've said it this way at least 5 times now. I hope someone's recording this because I would love to play back the clips one by one, right? Because I know for a fact that I've said this, and I know it's pretty hypocritical to use the word "no" when I say that, but I'm saying, okay,
When you're saying no right there, what were you saying?
Taven is referring to my
I have
definition
a
of knowledge.
presupposition. Yeah, I have a presupposition that
You have
we
a
can extrapolate.
presupposition.
Yeah, I have a presupposition.
Jesus Christ.
I don't have to look. If
You have a
there were,
presupposition?
yeah, what's
What
wrong
do you
with
think
that?
presupposition is?
An unjustified belief.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, it doesn't even make sense to say unjustified, but
Why don't you just say I
Right,
believe?
that's the
Why
whole
don't you just
point,
say I
right? So
believe
you're
that?
just saying that. No, it was just pointed out to you, right? To have a fucking basic belief is to mean that it can't be justified, right? So by Jovonn just asking you, what does it mean to have a presupposition, and you saying an unjustified belief, all
I
you're
think
saying
there are
on your view of
instances-
knowledge,
okay, fine. I don't have to
so
say.
on
I'll
your
get
view
rid
of
of the
knowledge, you're just saying a belief, dumbass.
Michael. Right. So when you already know that I don't have a definition for unjustified, so can't I just say belief, an arbitrary belief?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
All
it's
beliefs are not
arbitrary,
just
right?
knowledge. All
I
beliefs
didn't
are
say.
knowledge.
I didn't say beliefs were knowledge. I
You
don't know
said,
what
can't
knowledge
you
is.
say any unjustified belief? He was talking about in respect to the definition of knowledge, Taven. See, this is a problem, Taven.
What
You
is
don't
his
follow along
definition
with the
of knowledge?
conversation. Then you
No,
answer a
you're-
question.
Jovonn, don't project your definitions onto me. Right? You're not allowed to say knowledge if you can't even if it's not
Michael,
even
weren't you
my word.
talking about the
We've been trying to-
definition
look,
when he
stop.
responded with
Hang
it?
on just a second. Taven, what's your theory of knowledge? Just answer that question.
I don't have a theory of knowledge.
Okay. So when you earlier said that you took knowledge to be true belief,
Right, you're
Because
going back to this again.
justification-
Play back the audio clip, right? Because that's not what I said.
Can
I
you
said,
stop?
If
Can you stop? Look, when you earlier said
Michael,
that you
you
took knowledge
commenting faggots.
to be when you took knowledge to be true belief, right? And it was propositioned to you by Jovonn that it just so happens to be the case that a belief that somebody has becomes true in a year from now, that you're saying that at time t0 that they have knowledge of it. When it doesn't become true, that is, the truth maker doesn't obtain until time t1, you're saying that at time t0 they know it to be the case.
how can
It's
I know something if I don't have a definition for it? Are you
Yeah,
like some
that's
kind of
what we're asking
autistic
you.
kid or
You're
something?
just
Like,
objecting for no fucking reason whatsoever.
what do you mean I'm objecting for no fucking reason? Of course I
So
have reason.
you started talking shit on Iron's theory, on Iron's use of justification. You said he can't justify it, but your theory, your epistemic theory.
No. I didn't say he can't
stop,
justify it. Stop strawmanning me, Michael. I'm not gonna let you walk all over.
No. It just doesn't get to go away because there was like 4 fucking people in here when you said it, or whatever the case is, or there's been 4 minutes since time has passed. You were objecting to Iron's theory of epistemology. You were objecting to his knowledge claim because it couldn't be justified, yeah? You said justification just has no fucking meaning. Well, if that's the case, let's just answer the question. Does your objection to Iron or Ken's theory of epistemology apply to all theories of epistemology? And if not, how not? Presumably, you have a theory of justification, knowledge, and truth that is not vulnerable to the same objection that you raised with Iron and Ken.
I don't have a
raise
theory
it
of
here.
That's again, Michael, stop strawmanning me. Right? I never said I had a theory of justification. When did I say that?
Taven,
Could you point to an audio clip?
Taven, hold on for 1 second. At the very least, then, you're equivocating every time that you're talking about knowledge and when you say that you know things, right? Like, you have to understand that you're using that word in a way that is inconsistent with what you believe, but is consistent with the way that you know other people believe.
Okay, can I have a non-definition for something, and also refer to what you are saying? I remember specifically what our argument was. You said you talked about the physical. Right, Jovonn. I don't even know if you were here when we were talking about this. I'm addressing Iron now. I'm not addressing Jovonn. Iron. When we talked about physical reality.
Yeah, that wasn't me that answered. That was Michael.
I asked you, and I said, and this I remember specifically saying, you had a. I remember specifically saying, when you said knowledge, and I asked you
accused me of
JTB, and then I said JTB. I said justification was incoherent.
No, right? He never said that he had JTB. You're the one that brought that up. Now you're strawmanning.
Do you know why I brought that up? Do you know why I brought that up?
You're now strawmanning Iron.
Hold on. Yeah, you're right. I am. It was presumptuous of me to assume that that's his
theory.
You
are strawmanning. Okay, I'm glad we got that out.
Right, but Michael, you've been strawmanning me more than can be addressed, because you've been misrepresenting me the whole day. Now, before, hold on, Iron, is your theory of justification JTB? Is it like knowledge epistemology? What is that? Because I know you're on the server, and I know you like to say justification. And that's why I said that. Now you can say, well, it was presumptuous of me, but I was only using backhand information that I've been, from what I've been on the server. Been on the server for almost a year now. I'd like to think I know some of your presuppositions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's problems with the truth aspect or whatever, but it just seems irrelevant. I mean, yeah, sure. Pragmatically, let's just say JTB is fine.
How is it pragmatically justified? How does it pragmatically make any sense?
You're going to equivocate on epistemic and pragmatic justifiers, like I pointed out twice, like an hour ago. But go on.
Oh yeah, right. So you don't believe in justification in the way that I'm using it, right? That's what Michael is basically trying to point out earlier.
I don't have a way of using it, right? I'm critical of your way of using
it. But
you
you have like some kind of faint understanding of what I mean when I use it?
I've seen you on the server talking about epistemology and stuff like that, and this is why I assumed you were holding to JTB, as do a lot of people on the server. Now, you can say I was strawmanning you, but if I assumed that I was incorrect...
Hold on, Rox. Just to save myself some time, if I give you an answer, is my answer going to be coherent to you, or is it going to be equally incoherent as justification? I would
have to hear what your theory is. I don't know what your theory is. Complete theory, which is why we were even having the conversation.
Well, I mean, for me, honestly, like all this stuff is kind of interesting, but I think for me, there's like a deeper worry. Like, I mean, I haven't really thought about it a whole lot.
Fuck niggers.
But like, as it strikes me, I have a problem believing that someone really could be a skeptic about justification and like function. Like, I mean, I think it leads to some worries. Like if you do, like, think about like when you reason with me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Seamus, that's uninteresting.
Like you reason to me in this conversation using like argument forms, like modus ponens and shit like that, right? And so, I mean, if you don't think that what you were appealing to there is justified, right? Like, what? Like if it doesn't support anything, right, that was being said, why did you choose to say that and not talk about like a strawberry shortcake recipe? You see what I'm saying? Like, why is it why is
Because
it that
we're having a philosophical discussion.
even if it's intuitive, right? Even if you aren't justified, you just have intuitive notions, right? Of, you know, whatever these things are. Isn't it just kind of strange how your intuition like always maps or seems to map very, very closely with like what everyone thinks that they actually are justified in knowing? And so it's like if you think that it's just as justified to reply back with an argument in the form of modus ponens than it is to speak about a strawberry shortcake recipe, why did you choose one and over the other? Neither is more justified. Neither should be more preferred, right? It seems, you know, not in any real sense. Like, you know, something you could appeal to logically. Like maybe if you just felt like it or whatever. Wouldn't it just be weird that everything that you just felt like doing just happened to align perfectly with all the other people that believed in justification, modus ponens, argument forms, shit like that? I just don't think. I think that you're engaging in like a a philosophical like role play. You couldn't be a skeptic about justification. I don't think that that's really like possible, man. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I mean, I think you're just
I'll explain it to you. Right? So for me, like I've tried to do this, like a reductio ad absurdum on the process of logical deductions, and what you get is as a conclusion, if you try to do a reductio on the process of logic, is you get a conclusion that logic can be validated. And if you do it with that conclusion and then you put it as a reductio, right, as a premise in your argument, the conclusion that you get is logic cannot be validated. And so I think the closest thing that I've ever seen that we've gotten to truth is logic. For some reason, every time I try to criticize logic, it fails, right? So either it is the case that I arbitrarily trust my reasoning faculties, and then using that reasoning faculties kind of go and be critical about what others are saying. When they say something, I add it as a premise and then see how it follows, if it follows deductively. And in the case of justification, the premise can't even be demonstrated, right? There's no premise there. Like you're referring to something.
You said that justification was an incoherent concept. So when you say in the case of justification, the premise is incoherent, what the fuck are you talking about?
Can I have a premise?
You said these were your words. The justification was an incoherent concept, right? We tried to cash that out, and you said in the.
Hold on, you cut out. Can you repeat that? Hello?
Look, can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay, go ahead again. I didn't hear you. Hello? Hello? Hold on, I'll be right back.
Jesus Christ.
Hello?
It's on your end, Michael.
Yeah, I can't hear anything Michael's saying. I see it beeping in red, like green or whatever. But anyways, Shamos, you brought up this interesting analogy of the witch thing. Like, could you elaborate? I'm kind of interested in knowing what that is. Like, could you elaborate on that?
well, I mean, the point's kind of mute because it was that point moot. I mean, that point's kind of moot because I was under the impression that you were trying to defend a theory of knowledge that was just true belief, right? And I was just saying that if it were now I've realized all of this is not the case, but I was just basically saying, like, if you realize that justification was incoherent and then you just decided to whatever the pieces were left over to just call whatever's left over knowledge, right? It just seems like a strange practice. Like if you think about the witches, right? We have this notion of witches, right? Just like we have that notion of knowledge that had justification tied to it, right? We have these notion of witches, and let's say that we start to strip away things like how you've stripped away justification because you thought it was incoherent. Well, let's just say we're stripping away things because we think they're false. Like it's false that witches cast spells. It's false that they have cats. It's false that they can fly. You know, all of these things, right? And so, like, the only thing that's left over about the conceptions of witches would be like a woman with a broom, right? And that's like what I'm trying to draw the analogy to is true belief, right? And what I'm saying is it after you've stripped it away that far, is it even proper to call a woman with a broom a witch? Like, even like how you've stripped away that and you want to call true belief knowledge, even though I know that this isn't your position. I was just saying, why not just be like an error theorist about it? Why not just say something like,
I'm kind of confused when you say
witches
error.
aren't
Isn't that
ladies with brooms. I'd say something like, look, witches are not ladies with brooms, okay? Witches are women that cast spells, that have cats, that fly around on blooms and all this stuff, right? And it's just that thing doesn't refer to anything, but that is what a witch is. I'm not going to go into crazy town and say a witch is just a woman with a broom. Of course not. A witch is this thing. That's what people mean by witches. It just doesn't refer to anything in the world, okay? And so I was just saying, that seems a much more reasonable position to just say, look, knowledge, what people mean and what knowledge obviously is, you know, some type of true belief with justification or whatever like that. But justification is incoherent, you know, so there can't be knowledge, something like that.
Right, and I'd like to kind of shadow that and say I agree with you to an extent, right? Like if you have a definition for knowledge and you have a theory backing up that definition, for me, if the definition itself has a word that doesn't make sense and hasn't been demonstrated, right? Like I don't know what that would look like. Justification, right?
What does it mean to demonstrate something under a worldview where justification doesn't exist, you dumbass?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, when that's what I said. I've never been demonstrated, in any sense of the word, under an empirical worldview.
You don't believe in justification. You can't have things demonstrated to you. Everything that occurs is equally likely to occur any other way. It's all random. So what the fuck are you talking about? What's the causal relation that causes something to be demonstrated under your view?
It seems like you're going to have to be a skeptic about science.
Wait, are you guys coming from an empirical worldview? Are you guys coming from an empirical worldview?
I'm not saying
I observe something.
Justification or demonstration, bud.
So
you're
somebody's
skeptical
talking
about induction and science, Taven, all the way across the board. You're like a scientific skeptic about induction and all that crazy shit, huh?
Yeah, I am skeptical of induction, right? I think, sure, like if you have the analogy of the
science, right? As well.
No, I would say on a personal level though, right? I would like based on like I mean again, what is pragmatic is subjective, right? Under my definition. So when I say I find this to be pragmatic, what I'm saying is I find empiricism and the presupposition of empiricism helps me navigate my phenomenological experience. But when we're going beyond the phenomenological, right? Like in the discussion that we were having with Iron, he's saying not only is there a phenomenological experience, there's also a physical reality out there, and that conceptions formulate themselves in reality. And that was the kind of thing I was skeptical about, because to me, he said, you know, there needs to be a minimum amount of presuppositions. Then also contradicts himself 10 seconds later that, you know, I do have an additional presupposition that isn't necessarily needed. And my question was, why do you need that? And he said, intuitions. Well, intuitions are fallible, and that's what I was having a problem with. Right? You know, you can say based on intuition that there's God.
Like, I mean, you said earlier that a presupposition is an unjustified belief. I mean, I think I could show a counterexample to that. I'm trying to show that there could be something that's an unjustified belief.
I want to clarify before we move ahead. Seamus, I want to clarify that definition, right? When I say unjustified presupposition, a presupposition unjustified belief, that is what you guys define it as, or at least a lot of you that have debated it define it.
No. You define it.
No, I'm saying.
How do you define it, though?
We just have to re-roll
That's
the
what I
tape.
said. I think it's kind of
as unjustified belief. Joe called you out to say that it's just to say if you believe that an unjustified belief is just a belief because you're saying that justification doesn't exist, that properly basic just means to have a belief, then it's incoherent. Any belief could be properly basic. This is the fucking Republican objection.
What? No, that's not what I said. Michael, you're saying I said this, therefore this is what I hold. That's not true. I can say something I don't. I can use a definition that I don't
believe. But when I ask you a question, a direct question, I mean, like, you give me an answer, I like assume that answer is your position, like, and then when I find out 20 minutes later that like somehow, like that wasn't your position, even though like conversationally it was understood to be by all people except for yourself. It's just like, really, I mean, are we really
That's not
doing
true.
this?
That's not true. Shemo, that's not true, because remember when you asked me that question, I said, what is a presupposition? And I said, it's an unjustified belief, right?
Yeah, but what
And
you
then
meant by
10
that
seconds
was that
later,
it's what
10
we
seconds
mean.
later, what did I say 10 seconds later after that? I said, the concept of unjustification doesn't make any sense, so I just call it a belief. But what do you do instead? You interrupt and catch on that one thing that I said and say, this is what I believe. No, it's not. You didn't let me finish, right? How are you going to not let me
I
finish?
just wanted
then,
what your analysis of was a presupposition, and I thought that you said an unjustified belief. Okay.
Right, but it's not my fault. It's not my fault if Michael keeps interrupting me and gets on something that I don't hold to be true.
So what you mean by a presupposition is a belief? So
I think beliefs. I don't know how to put it in words. So, for example, we say
you have so many incoherent views. It's so hard to think that you've actually sat down.
Okay, what is incoherent? Yeah, no, go ahead. What is incoherent?
Shamos, why are you
it's
thinking
hard
this
to
is
actually
a
believe
serious
that you
position?
seriously sat down and reasoned your way to these positions. Like
Shamos, why would you think
it's
that?
incredible.
Right, because that's the
why
only
are you
thing I
biting?
use.
He's playing the global skeptic BS. Why are you biting on this bait constantly? I don't understand.
Okay, so no, the problem is when we're
Taven, you're just baiting. You're just trolling. We all understand what's going on.
I mean, I don't know if you're like
you walk
really
outside,
good.
you go to the store.
Yeah, I think that you're not trolling, but I just think that like you're basically the equivalent of trolling. Like even though you're not, you're being serious. You're being genuine. It's just like, so like when I asked you like what's a presupposition, I asked you for like a definition there, and then you said an unjustified belief. You meant that that's what we mean by it. But that wasn't very well apparent. So that what you then you clarified.
No, it wasn't apparent. It wasn't apparent because you interrupted me. It wasn't apparent because you interrupted
me. Belief. Is that really what you think a presupposition is?
Seamus, would you agree that I was interrupted? Would you agree that I was interrupted while I was making that definition? You can go back and play the clip. You can play this game with me all day long.
But I don't care about any of that, dude.
Why don't you care? Because you're accusing me of something and then 10 seconds later
Look, all you have to do is just define what you mean by your theory of knowledge, right? I brought this up at the beginning. All you have to do is define your theory of knowledge to wiggle out of the objections that we've been raising.
Why do I have to have a theory of
knowledge has anything? Stop interrupting me now. Well, you don't think that knowledge has anything to do with justification or warrant, so just give us your theory of knowledge. And if you don't have a theory of knowledge, that's fine. But don't criticize somebody else's epistemology because they don't have justification for it, guy. Especially if you think
of course I can do that. Possible. Like, am I constitutionally under arrest if I say that? Am I not allowed to say that?
It just means that you have no grounds for doing so, dumbass.
Wait, well, hold on. I can't be skeptical about a square circle?
I mean,
no.
Like,
You can't.
Michael,
answer
the question, moron.
Justification.
Very simple
if you don't
question.
think justification exists, dumbass.
Michael, it's amazing how you keep avoiding the questions, right? It's interesting, right? I ask you a question. Do you think square circles, that I can be skeptical about a square circle? And you don't answer the question. You ask another question, right? And I'm not opposing. I understand you will say I'm being hypocritical because I did the same thing. But guess what?
Is he cutting out on my end or she or whatever the fuck?
Presumably, you shouldn't be a skeptic about square circles. Presumably, you wouldn't have to be skeptical. You could know very, very firmly, by 100%, that they don't exist. So you wouldn't even have to be skeptical. You could just say, no, I'm not skeptical. I know for a fucking fact they don't exist. So, I mean, I don't even, none of these analogies are really holding. All this shit just is like fucking crazy. I'm not even interested in the fucking knowledge shit anymore, dude. I'm just interested in like all your fucking crazy ass views. Like, how do you define presupposition on your view, Taven? Every question I ask you is going to be couched with the caveat of on your view. So I don't ever want to hear you reply back with what other people think, or just say you don't have a view.
So if I were to define presupposition in a way, I would say it's a starting assumption, right? Like, so for example, you can have beliefs that are built on top of like what I would call presupposition, right? So let's say I believe that my sense perception is, it's consistent causally, right? That when I touch something, I presuppose that when I touch something, that I am what caused it to move based on induction.
That's what we call justifications, idiot.
That's not how you defined justification.
Yeah, it is.
Because you
a person like me who's a physicalist says that things are justified when based off my presuppositions about the physical external world It's
No,
close
that's an extra
to
presupposition
observations
because
happen.
that's an extra presupposition because
You were
you
just
can
talking
actually go about your life.
You were
You
just
can-
talking about stacking on top of presuppositions when you said justification.
What? No. Iron,
Well,
why would you
that's
say
what you
that there's
literally
a
just
physical
said.
reality apart from? Why would you say there's a physical reality apart from phenomenological experience, unless it's a You said it's a presupposition, but then you also
Yeah.
contradict yourself when you say we should minimize the number of
Yeah,
presuppositions. When
we also
in
talked
fact,
about justification, and you said.
Wait, hold on, Michael, stop
are
for a
you
second.
all gonna
Hold on,
white knight
Taven.
for
What you
Iron?
just said is utterly retarded. It's
Yeah,
not a
keep white knighting,
contradiction.
because guess what?
It's
That's
not a
all you guys are good at.
contradiction.
White knighting. You guys are a bunch of white belt,
No,
white knight
no,
cucks.
listen,
You
it's
can't
not
actually
white-
hold your own positions.
Taven,
Like
it's not white
I've been
knighting, right?
debating with
You think
one,
I'm white
two,
knighting for
3,
Iron?
and I've triggered all of you, right? You guys
You're,
have completely
oh,
triggered.
No,
Taven,
so
you're
this is
great,
why
dude.
I
Please
said he
come
was just
back.
trolling.
I'm not triggered at all. This is silly.
Oh, but no. Shame
Taven
on, I
just
would say,
accused
the
me of
Minotaur
white
symbol,
knighting for
but
Iron.
Jovonn,
That's
Michael,
hilarious.
Iron, you're all white knighting for everybody, right? This
Are
is
we
what you
butt
do.
touchers
You have
too?
nothing else
Just
to
call us
do.
butt touchers.
Taven realizes he said stupid shit. Now he's just using the John method.
I'm not using the John method.
Congratulations,
I'm saying that if you don't have the balls to actually face me,
Taven, that's what you're doing right now with the meta.
What do you mean?
Would you like
I've been
to
standing
go
my
one
own
on one,
for what,
Stud?
30 minutes
Hey,
now.
Stud, would you like to go one on one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Taven,
Like
do you-
somebody,
Wait, can we just
step up.
stop? Because what he said.
Yeah.
Hold on,
Jovonn,
people. What he said
where are your
last about
balls?
Iron's position was utterly retarded. Say the thing about Iron's position being a contradiction one more time.
Why would
I
you
said
guys
that.
have?
If you say,
Stop talking, John.
you asked me a question, moron.
I said John,
Right.
dumb fuck. Go ahead.
Where's
Listen,
John
why
John?
would you guys beg for a one-on-one whenever you've been gang raping him the entire time? Like, you guys are just pathetic.
John,
poking
you
your
gonna come in
chest
with
out.
just meta?
All right, okay. If you have a question about Iron's contradiction, he contradicted himself the moment he said that we should minimize the number of presuppositions. In my worldview, the number, and his definition may be different, right? But if I'm assuming that the concept of unjustification or justification doesn't exist, they're virtually the same thing. When he says, it's an unjustified belief, it's essentially the same thing when I say it's a presupposition. Right? Because for me, the concept might not exist, but that doesn't mean suddenly there's a equivocation going on there, right? Because he hasn't demonstrated, he has no idea what justification is. He can't say what justification is. There's no process.
Where's the contradiction?
Okay, I'll tell you what he said. We have to minimize the number of presuppositions, and he said the presupposition that I hold to is
It's not an answer to the question.
I'm telling you what the contradiction is. Do you want me to make the two premises?
Let him finish, Michael. Let him finish.
Let me make my premises. If I don't get to the second premise, how can I show it's a contradiction, moron? Are you guys like
Taven,
next
go ahead.
level autistic
Just go
retards or
ahead.
something?
Go
Like,
ahead, Taven.
guys, all right, okay. If you have a premise that, if you have a presupposition that that says we have to minimize the number of presuppositions, and then right after that you have more presuppositions than me, right? The moment you say that, you have contradicted yourself. Right?
No, that's not a
relying
contradiction.
on
No.
if we're no, because
Wait, let him finish, Michael. Let him finish.
because if you say there is a physical reality, and then it also follows that the world can exist without just based on a phenomenological experience, how does it follow that him having more presuppositions is not a contradiction?
Well,
This is why
there's
I
a
gave the
problem.
example.
There's a problem that we encountered when we had the conversation, right? Which is that you said it wasn't actually a contradiction. You just said I was special pleading for physicalism because obviously you could come up with other presuppositions that I would reject, right?
Is special pleading
Also,
non-sequitur?
saying that you would like to have the least number of suppositions,
I think
that having more suppositions than someone else isn't a contradiction.
I don't think
That's not a contradiction, Taven.
Yeah, I don't think a non sequitur is a contradiction necessarily. It just means that it doesn't follow, right? It's just not a justified inference.
Okay, so would you say it doesn't follow? Would you say that it doesn't follow that the fact that I can have I can hold to your all your worldviews, and I can get rid of the physical reality presupposition and still function and assume.
No, listen, Taven. If I thought that was the case, I wouldn't be a physicalist, right? So obviously, I have some justifications, or at
Right,
least
which is
there's
why
like
I
some
said that,
background
and I
ideas
asked
for why.
you to explain why you think that is the case.
Yeah, and I started to do that, but then like a bunch of things exploded.
And then a bunch of people interrupted, which is what they shouldn't have been doing, right? We're trying to have a normal conversation. They want to get in. White Knight, Shamos comes in, but he has some good points, right? But then Jovonn and Michael comes in. Oh, you have a definitional error. Because guess what? They have nothing else to do. They're pathetic pieces of shit. Like all they do is jerk off.
All the meta aside, right? It just doesn't seem consistent.
Taven, you seem very
And
upset.
if like idealism were true or like solipsism were true, it doesn't seem coherent to say that I'm going to project my own obstacles or end my own phenomenological experience, right? It just seems completely unintuitive to me.
No, I asked you, can you do without the physical reality? Because if you say you can do without it, that is also a presupposition, right? Whereas in my case, I would only have one presupposition that says, well, it's
that doesn't
possible.
fall under your definition of presupposition, dum-dum.
Listen, we have the same.
Michael, how many times do you have to White Knight for iron?
Taven, we both have the view that all we have is a strong intuition about what's the case. My intuition leads me to physicalism being the case, and yours leads you elsewhere. But we agree that we're basically resting on our intuitions.
But you have an extra premise. If we have the same worldviews, and presuppositions, and I assume we do because I know, we've talked in chat a lot, and I know we're very similar. And so if you say, I'm going to add another extra presupposition, it seems illogical to me. Like it seems like you're saying, for some reason, the physical reality must exist. And that is a presupposition.
No. What you said, it seems inconsistent, right? It seems illogical, right? It doesn't, it's not in virtue of your seeming that it is illogical. You're just emoting about some bullshit. Just prove that it is.
Okay, if the number of presuppositions that you have after you make the claim that we have to reduce the number of presuppositions, and you have two agents, right? Me and Iron. Iron has, let's say, 10 presuppositions. I have 9 presuppositions. Under his own worldview, my worldview would be better.
How?
No.
How?
Because he made the claim that we have to reduce the number of presuppositions.
No. I never said that.
Necessary presuppositions, guy.
No, Iron, there's a recording of this. You said that. I asked you, do you think we should reduce the number of presuppositions? And you said,
no, I said generally.
We should. Yeah, and then I said, why are you being inconsistent when you're saying generally? And I asked you for an explanation, but you never gave it. And then everybody started interrupting. Now you can make your case, but you're not going to go back on me and say, well, this is what I believed, or this is what you believe.
No, Taven, I'm being clear. I'm being clear that I said generally, and I didn't say we should reduce them all the way. Otherwise, I'd be like a hard solipsist like Xbox or something, right?
Right, and I asked you, why is that a problem?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like an intuitively good way of navigating the world.
And then I asked you.
Yeah, it's also irrational to be. It's also irrational to be a solipsist for you to be on here interacting with us. Because if it is the belief that there are no other minds, then why are you engaging with other folk here?
Oh, it's kind of like the nihilistic question, right? Like, if there's no meaning, why are you doing anything? Because I want to.
Sure. Again, you're just appealing to some sort of emotion, right? Just
Michael,
like when you appeal.
What is the problem with personal
I'm not done,
preference?
Sweetheart, calm down. I'm also saying that your appeal to pragmatism earlier wasn't also an epistemic justifier, right? You're just appealing to intuition. Stop.
Michael, you
stop. You're just appealing to intuitionism. You're just appealing to some sort of fucking thing that does not justify it. And then when I say it doesn't justify it, you should agree. There's just everybody has a belief. Therefore, everybody has a properly basic belief, or everybody has a proper or has a belief that is basic, such that it's true. If it is the case and an externalist justification, which you don't think exists, if those standards obtain, you're just confused. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Hold on now. You think that me pointing out that he has X number of presuppositions, and then he has X plus 1, right? You say you want to minimize presuppositions. You don't see a problem with that?
He didn't say that.
Minimize. What do you mean minimize, right? It looks, stop. So it might be the case that you could have like a minimum standard, but we could say it's minimum with respect to its necessity. Yeah. So there might be a set number of premises that would be required right? It would be necessary to prove a conclusion, right? So if you're saying that there's some sort of like set number of premises, or stop, you're saying there's some sort of set number of premises or a set number of presuppositions, which you just take to be beliefs to reach a conclusion or to argue for a point, then you're just not saying anything informative.
Okay. I have a very good refutation for this, right? So you said, and this is why I'm laughing. So let's say that, right? Let's say that. Wouldn't that itself be a presupposition, which would add to the amount of things that you have?
Yeah. So you're committed. Stop. You're committed. You just asked me a question, sweetheart. So calm down. I'm gonna answer it. What you're committed to saying is that no presuppositions are better than any, dumbass.
I didn't say that they were better than any.
Wait,
I said if you have a presupposition. Again, Michael,
is
you're
it
misrepresenting
the
me.
case? Is the principle to minimize the number of presuppositions? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
so is zero
share that
presuppositions better than one?
What?
Is zero presuppositions better than one? Hello? I guess we're just not answering questions now.
Correct.
If the principle is that to minimize presuppositions, then you're committed to saying that zero presuppositions is better than one. Guy?
Yeah, that seems like that would follow.
What the
Yeah,
fuck
why is that even a
wrong with
question?
human being?
Unless he wants to hide it in like fewer in the definition, like fewer necessitates at least minimally one or whatever.
Look, it's like twice now. Like, what is with these people coming in? Like, Jovonn's agreeing with iron? What fucking world am I in? Where did we get these people?
Seriously, why is that even a question?
I think he was assuming that I think that fewer is necessarily better, but I don't think that's I don't think that's the case, really.
Well, that was his position, or hers, or whatever it is.
It's a boy, for the record.
Also,
way to disparage his tender.
like I'm glad Jovonn caught this too. This idea of properly basic beliefs or presuppositions just being unjustified beliefs. To a person who doesn't hold a theory of justification, or that justification is incoherent, that's merely to say that presuppositions are just beliefs. So why make the distinction between any other set of beliefs and presuppositions? Every belief on your view is a presupposition. And it's gone.
Why do you keep calling